This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for remarks by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor during the 2024 lame duck session of the 118th Congress. Schumer praised departing Sergeant at Arms General Karen Gibson for her service on December 19th. The following material is protected by copyright.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Madam President, this morning, thanks to Republicans, we're less than 48 hours away from a Christmas shutdown. Unfortunately, it seems Republicans are in shambles over in the House. But as they try to piece things together, they should remember one thing. The only way to get things done is through bipartisanship. The only way. Let me repeat. The only way to get things done is through bipartisanship. Now, on the Sergeant at Arms. Today, it fills me with immense gratitude to pay tribute and say thank you to the Senate Sergeant at Arms, General Karen Gibson, sitting right here. None of us, no matter what we do, could get through the day without the individual responsible for maintaining order, enforcing security, and keeping everyone in the Senate safe. That's what the Sergeant at Arms does. General Gibson took on this role in March of 2021 in the painful aftermath of the January 6th insurrection. By no means did she need to take this job. It was the Senate that needed her. We needed her 3 decades of leadership as an Army intelligence officer. We needed her steady hand and ability to change how organizations function. And to this day, I thank God she answered my phone call. General Gibson helped us get through those difficult months after January 6th. She was a breath of fresh air, a boost of morale, a jolt of much-needed confidence. She transforms how the Sergeant at Arms operates for the better. Under General Gibson's watch, her team revitalized how the Senate approaches security and safety from the top to the bottom. She increased how we share intelligence, communications, and planning with the rest of the federal government and state and local partners. She transformed the way the Senate handles moments of crisis. There is now a single Senate Operations Center that stands watch at all times and alerts us to potential threats or disruptions in real time. She was a godsend for other Senate staff across the Capitol complex, introducing new emergency preparedness applications, new training, new protocols staff could adopt to keep their offices safe and prepared. Finally, she revolutionized how the Senate approaches cybersecurity, conducting the most comprehensive cybersecurity assessment ever. And every step of the way, she had a first-rate team by her side to help execute her vision. And one other thing, a bit intangible. The morale of our Capitol Police Force has dramatically improved after the horrible days of January 6th. And much of that goes to what General Gibson did. She made them feel needed and confident and loved and well-trained and prepared. And I can tell just from speaking to so many Capitol Police officers how much they appreciated her tenure and her caring. So I am forever grateful to General Gibson for her 4 terms as our Sergeant at Arms. The Senate today is far more secure and far more prepared than the day she entered the role. My congratulations to her on a job well done. And the Senate thanks her, all of us, Democrat and Republican, for many years of service. Ann Berry. I also want to say thank you to our wonderful Secretary of the Senate, Ann Berry. Of the many talented and exceptional Senate officers I have the privilege of nominating as Majority Leader, Ann is one of the very best. The job of Secretary of the Senate is one of the utmost important and indispensable jobs here in the Senate. In fact, just days after the Senate achieved its first quorum in 1789, one of its top priorities was to elect the very first Secretary of the Senate. Back then, the Senate's responsibilities were merely a fraction of what they are today. There's virtually nothing that happens in the Senate these days, legislatively, financially, administratively, that doesn't cross the Secretary's desk. So to hold such an extraordinary position that brings life to the Senate, you need an extraordinary human being who brings life to the job. Where is she? She's probably just so busy doing her job, she's not here. But anyway, that is Ann Berry to a T. From the moment Ann was sworn in, she's carried out her responsibilities as secretary with unparalleled excellence, supreme professionalism, and she did it while making history as the first ever black woman to serve as Secretary of the Senate. Of course, Ann's success as secretary comes as little surprise to anyone who knows her background. She's a veteran of some of the most revered senators to pass through the chamber, the likes of Senator Leahy, Edwards, Carper, Jones, and my mentor, Senator Moynihan. For the last nearly 4 years, Ann has been one of the most invaluable members of the entire Senate operation. She made our days easier, our operations smoother, and made the Senate work better for the American people. And that, Madam President, is perhaps the highest testament to a public servant. So, Ann, on behalf of a grateful Senate, a grateful Democratic caucus, and a grateful Majority Leader, we say congratulations. Thank you. Job well done. Now to Dan Yokin, who I will so dearly miss. Is he here somewhere? Where's Dan? Well, Dan Yokin. Socrates said, "The only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance." If that's true, and I think Socrates was onto something, then this is going to be a particularly difficult goodbye for me to get through. Because today, it fills me with immense gratitude, but also deep sadness to bid farewell and thank you to one of the most knowledgeable and trusted members of my team, Dan Yokin. Officially, Dan has served as my Director of Rapid Response the entire time I've served in the leadership, but in truth, he is far more than that. He is, in a word, the brain, the knowledge base of our messaging and research operation. He's the truth keeper, the fact sleuth, the go-to person when our team needs something figured out right away. But what sets Dan apart is that he also sees the big picture. He's not just looking at the little details. Anyone who excels at these things by necessity must possess a love of details, and Dan certainly does that. But what makes him so effective is how fluidly, how effortlessly, how naturally he connects the details to the main thrust of what our team tries to do every day and to the larger picture of where we're headed as a caucus and as a country. And Dan is also a craftsman. There's no speech, no press release, no tweet, no video that doesn't pass through his careful touch. A native of Nevada, Dan came to the Senate and earned his stripe as a young press assistant for the former leader, Harry Reid, who we miss every day. Every single day, it was Dan's job to wake up early, read all of the news, and then brief Senator Reid personally on what was going on that day. If Senator Reid had a question, it was Dan's job to answer. If there was a specific detail he wanted, it was Dan's job to remember it. For most people, right out of school, that would pretty much be a baptism by fire. But for Dan, it was confirmation, early confirmation, that he belonged here in the Senate. In no time, he became Leader Reid's Deputy Communications Director and then joined my team as the Research Director of the DPCC. And when I became leader, there was never a moment of doubt that I wanted Dan to come with me. Running our messaging operation is not easy. It's a round-the-clock task, 7-day-a-week commitment. I'd call him at all hours to ask him about this or that. It's stressful, ever-changing, thankless, and on top of that, they have to deal with me. Not so easy sometimes. But every day my team succeeds, and I succeed, because Dan has always been there as a steady and stabilizing force. His knowledge of the Senate, its history, its members, its operation, gives our work shape and form. All this is possible because deep down Dan loves this institution and loves this great democracy. Of course, anyone who knows Dan understands he loves many other good things as well. Just ask him, for example, about the Las Vegas Golden Knights and that time that they came to the White House to celebrate their championship. Or ask him about the last Roots concert he went to. Or ask him about poker night. Or about the next time he's planning to organize a Schumerland outing to Audi Field. Ask him, certainly about his wonderful family, his beautiful redhead 2-year-old, his wife, and his partner for so many years as well, and then ask him about their dog Daisy, who's a regular here in the Senate on Friday, every Friday. Ask him about any of these things, and you'll see Dan for who he is. Someone who leads a rich life, someone who has a gifted mind, and someone who is loyal, kind, thoughtful to all those he comes across. Having him on my team for so long has been a blessing to our office, to the Senate, to the country. So Dan, wherever you are, he's probably working as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know how much we will miss you. You know how much we love you. You know how much you will always be part of our Schumer family. And we can't wait to see what the future holds in store for you. I yield the floor. I don't note anything. I yield the floor to the Republican leader.
McConnell paid tribute to his chief of staff.
For months now, I've been calling the Senate's attention to the extraordinary people who served me, this institution, and our nation so well, and for so long in the Republican leader's office. Today, I've reached the end of the list. My one remaining task is to prepare our colleagues for Senate without Sharon Soderstrom. To tell the story of my chief of staff, you might start in 2010, when she assumed that title, or in 2007, when she joined my team, or perhaps back in 1999, when she set up in the Republican leader's suite for the first time. But if you want to make sense of the person I've been so fortunate to have at my right hand, the friend and counselor I've trusted so deeply for so long, it's worth starting at the beginning with the people who made Sharon Soderstrom who she is. Sharon grew up in Stony Brook, New York, on the campus of a Christian school where her father was a teacher and headmaster. In the house on campus where Carl and Jean Soderstrom raised Sharon, along with their brother Mark and her sister Cheryl, faith and learning were unshakable cornerstones. Quite literally, the windows of Sharon's bedroom looked out on one side to the chapel and on the other side to the classrooms. When you hear about Sharon's upbringing for the first time, everything you know about her starts to make even more sense. My senior-most advisor is a woman of integrity, a teacher who leads by example, and rather than reinvent the wheel, I think the best way to sum up her distinguished service is through some of the lessons that her favorite teacher, her dad, taught in the same way. Lesson number one: do meaningful work for a long time among peers who become lifelong friends. A long time ago, I won't tell quite how long, Sharon began her meaningful work here in the Senate as a junior legislative aide to a freshman senator. The prospect of devoting her life to this institution might yet have crossed her mind, but the Senate was beginning to reel her in and work its will all the same. Sharon likely wouldn't have allowed herself to imagine that someday the Senate's sharpest minds would bring their weightiest questions to her, or that eventually an entire institution would come to lean on her voluminous legislative knowledge, her plumb and true political analysis, and her wise personal counsel. And if she had, her deep humility wouldn't have let it show. Instead, perhaps the sharpest and most singularly capable staff leader the Senate has ever seen, chose to invest her time and talents in building teams, in mentoring colleagues, and in making a series of high-profile principals look a lot smarter than we deserve. She spent her time in public service notching accomplishments of the greatest consequence on the most visible stage, all while nimbly deflecting the praise. But what Sharon hasn't been able to dodge is the admiration of legions of colleagues, past and present, who count standing in the trenches with her among the greatest honors of their careers. It's no mystery why Sharon's calendar fills so quickly with invitations to celebrate weddings and birthdays, and it's no surprise how readily she clears her schedule to be with friends and colleagues in moments of grief. Our friend, our chief, has done meaningful work for its own sake, but she's got the admirers to prove it. I'll turn now to the second lesson from Mr. Soderstrom. Decide to live as a servant and take every moment as an opportunity to practice public service. It's there, right in the name. And yet the brand of gracious and selfless leadership that has become Sharon's calling card and the thoughtful courtesy which comes naturally to her, these are exceedingly rare. I was reminded recently of an occasion years ago, about this time in December, when one of the junior-most members of our front office team brought a familiar concern to Sharon. The cheapest flight she could find to get home for the holidays was non-refundable. And it was looking more and more like the Senate might have to spend Christmas at work. What should she do? Sharon didn't hesitate. She told this young lady to keep her flight to get home safely, and the team would make do. In fact, the team did make do, and Sharon was the first to volunteer to cover a shift at the front desk. I'm certain that no one who knows her would be surprised to hear this. Certainly not any of us who've watched Sharon summon the strength, even when her enormous professional responsibilities weighed heaviest, to be a loyal sister, a loving aunt to her nephew Carl, and a devoted caregiver to both of her parents in their final years. May the record reflect that the Senate's most influential staff leader chooses every day to live as a servant. The third lesson is to laugh often. And as I'm sure Sharon's dad would add, not just when there's cause to be joyful. That means laughing even when you don't get the reference, as Sharon does good-naturedly when her colleagues use sporting analogies around the office. Of course, it helps that almost invariably such references are meant as compliments. Like when they compare her legislative and procedural chops to Willie Mae's dual threat of speed and power. Or when a wise former colleague likened staffing the Republican leader's office around Sharon to building a starting lineup without a franchise player. But in a job as strenuous and demanding as Sharon's, laughing often means finding levity in even the most confounding circumstances. Example, the time she and a colleague were leaving the White House after a completely fruitless negotiation in the middle of a government shutdown. As I understand it, they were walking out the wrong exit. They heard a guard with a machine gun yelling, "Stop." Without missing a beat, my top advisors turned to her colleague and remarked, "If we just keep walking, this can all be over." Fortunately for me and for the entire country, even in the bleakest of stalemates, Sharon was just joking. Heeding these lessons isn't some simple, surefire formula for producing a prolific public servant in the mold of Sharon. Devotion to meaningful work is always good advice. And yes, if more people practice servant leadership and learn to laugh more, the world would be a much better place. But let's be absolutely clear. Sharon Soderstrom is one of one. The combination of unflappable calm, unassailable integrity, unwavering conviction, and unshakable devotion that resides in my chief of staff is greater than the sum of its parts. One of Sharon's former colleagues on my staff once described her office as an emergency room, where colleagues would come wheel in stretchers heaped with big, thorny problems, and a head doctor with nerves of absolute steel would begin to set things right. Invariably, Sharon's steady demeanor inspired confidence in others. Her resolve boosted morale. And from the most niche institutional matters to the heaviest questions of national policy, her utter and complete competence carried the day. Now, I'll admit I wasn't the first member of the body to recognize Sharon's talents, not even the first Republican leader. But claiming dibs on Sharon and managing to keep her for so long has been among my proudest accomplishments. Come January, the Senate will convene again. The 119th Congress will bring us a new slate of weighty business, new moments of minor crisis, and new opportunities to better serve the nation that we all love. But in the most trying moments and the most triumphant ones, a great many of us will feel like something is missing. We'll miss Sharon, the 101st Senator, on the case and at our sides. Sharon, you've served the Senate with honor. You are the greatest at what you do. You modeled the lessons of the ones you look up to most, and you've earned countless friends who look up to you. The proudest triumphs of my time in this office have been your doing, and I'm forever in your debt.
Madam President,
Senator from North Carolina.
I ask unanimous consent that any members or staff in the chamber at this time be allowed to applaud for a period of up to 30 seconds.
Without objection.
Incoming Majority Leader John Thune then paid tribute to McConnell.
Mr. President,
The Republican whip.
Mr. President, I rise today to pay tribute to the longest-serving party leader in Senate history, Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Over the course of a political career that began with a hard-fought race for student council president in his junior year of high school, a race, I might add, that he won with what would become his signature blend of hard work, intelligence, and determination. Mitch has built a legacy that will long outlast his time here in the United States Senate. Mr. President, the day he became the longest-serving party leader in Senate history, Leader McConnell delivered a speech discussing past Senate party leaders and their characteristics, from the mastery of relationships demonstrated by Lyndon Johnson to the, quote, tackle football, end quote, of Joseph Taylor Robinson. And it got me thinking about some of the things that have characterized Mitch's tenure. And there are three of them that stand out to me in particular. First, there's Mitch's peerless knowledge of Senate procedure. I suspect few who have served in this body have developed the kind of knowledge that Mitch possesses of the most arcane details, and they are arcane, of Senate rules. But Mitch recognized early on that knowledge of Senate procedure could play a big part in success as a senator. And it was right. He was right. And so with his signature determination, he set out to acquire it and became an undisputed master. Second, Mr. President, to that wealth of knowledge, he has added a fierce commitment to the Senate as an institution, a commitment I hope to emulate when I take the reins as Majority Leader next year. There are a lot of people out there these days who would like to see the Senate turn into a copy of the House of Representatives. But that's not what our founders envisioned or what our country needs. And Mitch has served our entire country by fighting to ensure that the Senate maintains its institutional character. Finally, Mr. President, perhaps the aspect of Mitch's tenure that stands out to me the most is the work that he's done to protect the rule of law by filling the judiciary with judges and justices who understand what the role of a judge is: to interpret the law, not make it, to call balls and strikes, not rewrite the rules of the game. During his time as Majority Leader, Mitch oversaw the confirmation of 234 men and women to the federal bench, 3 of them as Supreme Court justices. And the effects of that will be felt for a long time to come in decisions up and down the judiciary that respect the law and the Constitution. That, Mr. President, is no small legacy. And Mitch can step down from his post knowing that no one has done more to preserve our legal system and the essential role that it plays in our republic. Mitch, it has been a great honor to serve with you. And I'm grateful that while you're stepping down from your role as leader, you will still be here in the Senate, bringing your mastery of Senate procedure to leadership of the Senate Rules Committee. Hopefully you won't mind a few knocks on your door for advice. Thank you for your long and faithful service to our party, to the Senate, and to our country. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in the years ahead. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without express written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Visit us online at www.fednet.net for more about our coverage of Congress.